Have you ever imagined waking up one day and slowly becoming unrecognizable to the world around you? For one woman in history, that nightmare became reality. But behind the cruel headlines and shocking photographs was a loving mother, a strong survivor, and a woman who sacrificed everything for her children. This is the tragic and inspiring story of Mary Ann Bevan. In the early 1900s, newspapers cruelly called her the ugliest woman in the world. People paid money just to stare at her, but very few people knew the truth. Mary Ann Bevan was not born different. She was once known as a beautiful young woman with a normal and happy life. Her story would later become one of the most heartbreaking examples of how society treated people who looked different. Yet despite the pain and humiliation, Mary Ann showed incredible courage. Mary Ann was born in London, England in 1874. As a young woman, she lived an ordinary life and worked as a nurse. Friends described her as kind, intelligent, and attractive. In 1903, she married a man named Thomas Bevan. The couple had 4 children and seemed to have a happy future ahead of them. But everything changed after her husband suddenly died. Mary Ann was left alone to raise 4 children during a difficult time in history. Money became a serious problem, and life grew harder every day. At the same time, something strange was happening to her body. Mary Ann began developing symptoms of a rare medical condition called acromegaly. Acromegaly happens when the body produces too much growth hormone, usually because of a tumor in the pituitary gland. Slowly, her face changed shape. Her jaw became larger, her hands and feet grew bigger, her appearance transformed dramatically over time. Today, doctors understand this disease much better, but in the early 1900s there were very few treatments available. Instead of receiving sympathy, Mary Ann became the target of cruel jokes and public ridicule. People stared at her in the streets, newspapers mocked her appearance, and society treated her more like an attraction than a human being. Desperate to support her children, Mary Ann answered a strange advertisement looking for the ugliest woman. The contest was connected to circus and sideshow entertainment, which was very popular at the time. She won. Soon after, Mary Ann began working for the famous Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus in the United States. Crowds gathered just to look at her. People laughed, pointed, and treated her like a spectacle. But Mary Ann endured it all for one reason: her children. Every insult, every stare, and every painful moment helped put food on the table for her family. That is what makes her story so powerful. Behind the stage lights and cruel headlines was not a monster, but a mother is making unimaginable sacrifices. Mary Ann Bevan spent many years performing in sideshows before passing away in 1933 at the age of 59. Today, historians and medical experts see her very differently. Her story is no longer about mockery. It is about strength, survival, and human dignity. She reminds us of how cruel society can be when people judge others solely by their appearance. But she also reminds us of something greater. Real beauty is often found in courage, sacrifice, and love. Mary Ann Bevan gave up her pride and endured public humiliation so her children could have a better life, and that is something the world should never forget. What do you think about Mary Ann Bevan's story? Could you imagine living through something like that in today's world? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, click the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. What if one man's face became so famous that people traveled across Europe just to see it? In the 1800s, there was a man whose nose was so enormous that people believed it couldn't possibly be real. Some called him a medical mystery, others turned him into a living spectacle. But behind the strange stories and exaggerated rumors was a real person with a real life. This is the fascinating story of Thomas Wadhouse, also known to history as Thomas Wetters. During the 18th century, Europe was obsessed with unusual people. Circuses, traveling shows, and public exhibitions became extremely popular. Crowds paid money to see giants, strongmen, bearded ladies, and people with rare medical conditions. Among all these unusual figures, one man stood out more than anyone else. Thomas Wadhouse became famous because of one incredible feature: his gigantic nose. According to old reports, his nose measured nearly 7.5 inches long. That is longer than many modern smartphones. Even today, his story continues to shock people around the world, but separating fact from legend is not easy. Very little is known about Thomas Wadhouse's early life. Historians believe he was born in England during the 1700s. At the time, official records for ordinary people were often incomplete. As a result, many details about his childhood have been lost to history. Some reports claim he worked as a performer in a traveling circus or sideshow. Others say he spent time entertaining crowds at fairs across England. What made Thomas unforgettable was his appearance. His nose was described as enormous, hanging far beyond his mouth and chin. People who saw him often could not believe their eyes. In a world without television or the internet, unusual physical features attracted massive attention, and Thomas became one of the most talked about curiosities of his time. The most famous description of Thomas Wadhouse came from a book published in the 1800s called The Book of Wonderful Characters. The writer claimed Thomas had the largest nose ever recorded. According to the story, the nose measured about 19 centimeters, or around 7.5 inches. Even though modern historians debate whether the measurement was fully accurate, there is little doubt that Thomas had a very unusual condition. Some experts believe he may have suffered from a medical disorder that caused abnormal tissue growth. Others think the stories about him became exaggerated over time, especially because traveling shows often used dramatic advertising to attract paying crowds. In those days, showmen regularly stretched the truth to make performers seem even more unbelievable. Still, whether exaggerated or not, Thomas Wadhouse became legendary. His image appeared in books, drawings, and collections of strange historical figures for generations. Life for sideshow performers during that period was complicated. On one hand, public exhibitions gave unusual people a way to earn money and survive in a difficult world. On the other hand, audiences often treated performers as objects instead of human beings. People laughed, stared, and made cruel comments. Thomas likely experienced both fame and humiliation at the same time, but performers like him helped create the early entertainment industry long before modern movies or television existed. Crowds were fascinated by anything rare or mysterious, and for many performers, sideshows became the only available way to make a living. Despite the challenges, Thomas Wadhouse became one of the most remembered names from that strange era of entertainment history. One reason Thomas remains mysterious today is that there are very few confirmed photographs or official documents about him. Some historians even question whether certain drawings truly showed his real appearance. In the 1700s and 1800s, storytellers often exaggerated unusual people to make them seem larger than life. As a result, the legend of Thomas Wadhouse may have grown bigger over time, just like the stories told about pirates, outlaws, and circus attractions. But whether every detail is true or not, his story reveals something important about human nature. People have always been fascinated by what they do not understand. Today, Thomas Wadhouse is remembered as one of history's most unusual figures. His story continues to appear in documentaries, articles, and books about strange historical mysteries, but modern audiences often view him differently from how people did centuries ago. Instead of simply laughing at his appearance, many now see him as someone who lived in a harsh world where physical differences were turned into public entertainment. His life reminds us how society has changed and how important compassion and understanding truly are. So, was Thomas Wadhouse really the man with the largest nose in history, or did his legend grow larger with every retelling? We may never know the complete truth, but one thing is certain: more than 200 years later, people are still talking about him. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more strange and fascinating stories from history. And tell us in the comments, do you think Thomas Wadhouse's story was real or exaggerated over time?